If bullying yourself and self-hate worked when it comes to achieving success, you would have already achieved it. So why are you still stuck? There's a common belief, and sometimes I think it's very subliminal, that you just need to be harder on yourself, work harder, criticize yourself more, and always be striving for the next best version of yourself. And I don't think this extreme method is how you're actually going to achieve what you're going to achieve. Being overly critical of yourself will just leave you burnt out, and it won't give you the proper tools within yourself to handle the levels of success and the things that you will achieve later down the line. A lot of times perfectionism and self-doubt in the self-help community, in the types of books, media, podcasts, articles one might read when they start out on this journey, a lot of the times they're disguised as motivation. And I think this gets even more accentuated given the fact that we live in a capitalistic society where hustle culture is very prominent and promoted and glamorized, and we feel guilty for resting. We're comparing ourselves to people online and images of other people that have been edited, and it's just a lot going on. When you engage in negative self-talk, like, if only I could have just done it better, if only I could be as good as this person, I'm so stupid, I'm so ugly, I'm so untalented, you're actually triggering your body to overload on cortisol because your body is perceiving this as a threat. As you may already know, too much cortisol in the body leads to inflammation, anxiety, fatigue, and impaired memory and decision making. Chronic self-criticism and perfectionism keeps your brain in this constant state of cortisol overload. Part of the reason why people can achieve some things and get to very high levels of success or make a lot of money through using things like not taking a rest, perfectionism, etc., but you'll never be able to truly appreciate what you have or appreciate yourself for accomplishing what you have accomplished because you'll just be so burnt out, anxious, fatigued, and just overall not feeling good within. So the more frequently you're repeating these negative thoughts and negative things to yourself about yourself, the stronger they will become. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where thinking negatively about yourself is just your go-to. It becomes automatic, and it's harder and harder for your brain to think other thoughts. Over time, this damages your prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that fully develops when we reach about 26, and it's responsible for planning, rational thinking, and emotional regulation. So if you're damaging it, over time this leads to even less confidence, more self-doubt, procrastination, and overthinking. People who frequently engage in self-criticism are also less likely to try new things because any new thing could be perceived as a huge threat. Self-hate triggers perfectionism and procrastination, and this makes it even harder to complete tasks efficiently. It also reduces intrinsic motivation, which means if you don't have a really strict deadline or huge consequences if you don't do something, you're more likely not going to do it. It becomes harder and harder for you to motivate yourself and for you to really dial down and focus on what it is you need to do. A study from the University of California found that self-compassionate individuals were way more productive and resilient compared to those who relied on self-criticism to get by. So it's really about rewiring your brain so that over time it instead comes up with those self-compassionate thoughts that are going to be so much better for you, your health, and your productivity and reaching your goals. It will be way more helpful towards improving all of those things versus the negative self-talk. So how do we break this cycle? A lot of it comes down to mindfulness, and this is basically observing without judgment. So if you're operating in like a self-hate, really judgmental point of view, you might put yourself down if you catch yourself doing something wrong, or if you don't do something perfectly, or whatever the case is. So instead of noticing something and criticizing it, you're going to notice it and say, okay, I'm doing this right now. Why is that? Or I'm doing this, let me instead do that. Am I feeling like this is too much? Do I need to set a boundary? Do I need to take a little break? And then even just swapping out certain phrases, like instead of I'm so bad at this, you could teach yourself over time to think, I'm still learning. It's so good that I'm trying something new and learning. I have definitely personally struggled a lot with perfectionism throughout the years, and I've talked about this before on my podcast, but for the longest time, I never knew that I was a perfectionist because I think my image of a perfectionist in school, and it's so funny because this reasoning is literally like definition perfectionism. I didn't think of myself as a perfectionist because like in school, like I just always think of when we would have to make posters of some kind in school. I was like, that's a perfectionist. Like I'm not a perfectionist because my work doesn't look as good as theirs. And now, having grown up, having learned, so much about this topic and like doing self-reflection and all of that, just learning about myself, it's like, that's kind of what makes you a perfectionist, is because it's like, oh, well, I'm not a perfectionist because mine wasn't good enough. And perfectionism really holds you back so much. It's so crazy. I think for me, my podcast is a huge example. I remember when I first started my podcast up again, making it a regular thing, I was so embarrassed to promote it. I was so scared of what people I knew would think or say. And I remember my friend one time was like, I didn't even know you had a podcast. And that radicalized me. No. But in that moment, I was like, wow, like I'm really limiting myself because I'm having these thoughts of like, it's not good enough. It's not good quality enough. I'm not qualified enough. Like it honestly wasn't even until recently that I was like, no, I know that I love to do this and I need to stand up. Like it starts from within, you're the one that has to believe in yourself because you can't rely on external validation. And I think that's a lot of what perfectionism is you want someone else to approve of you. So it's really about stepping back into your own lane, back into your own power and realizing like, no, I validate myself. And that's also when your best work comes, I feel, because you're doing something genuine, you're doing something that you really 100% stand behind. And that doesn't mean you can always improve later or change it later. But then it's like you're building and maybe you're improving it and changing it on a solid foundation of like, I know why I'm doing this. I know that I believe in myself. I know that I enjoy this, that this is aligned with me and what I value. So anything you do build and change, it is going to build versus trying to build your goal on a foundation of something rickety like self-doubt or 100% relying on other people's opinions. Because even if people are really hyping you up, I feel like that's like, we see that a lot with, influencers like on TikTok that will blow up. Everybody loves them so much for like a week, sometimes longer. And then it all comes crashing down because it's almost like they didn't have enough substance or like value. Like everything was just kind of based on, oh, other people love me right now, so I'm just gonna ride that wave instead of like building something concrete that like is longer lasting. That's not to say cause harm in society because it doesn't matter what people think. But you know what I mean? Like when it comes to personal goals and your vision of yourself and your life. So number one, of course, it starts with mindfulness. It starts with awareness in your day-to-day of those small habits and the small moments where you're doubting yourself, where you're just really easily giving into peer pressure or someone else's opinion or what they want rather than prioritizing you and what you want. It's about feeling comfortable taking up space. It's about speaking up for yourself. It's about feeling good in yourself. I really think healthy habits build so much self-confidence because it's like, yeah, I did that. If you eat healthy for a week, if you don't skip a workout in a week, out of just not wanting to do it, not because you're like sick or like luteal phase or something, but it's like, yeah, I did that. I can make a promise to myself and keep it. I'm investing in myself. I spend time, energy, money in my health, in my body, and in prioritizing what I want and what's good for me. That's another thing, like setting little small goals that you can easily win and that you will still feel good about and like you accomplished something and that is aligned with, again, yourself, wellness, and where you want to be. I think the next kind of layer of this, once you kind of start with these daily things and mindfulness and just kind of like small things that are in your control, it kind of expands then to relationships. If you have a friend that is always kind of shady to you or always wants to have it their way, I think as you start building your own self-confidence, you will start to peep these things more because they will so drastically be in contrast to your new kind of journey of self-love and being real, and being aligned and being your best self. Someone who is constantly always wanting to have it their way, who is always kind of throwing these jabs at you, who's kind of rude to you, who doesn't really value you, your opinion, etc. That's not someone who's their best self. That's not someone who is operating from a place of self-love. They need to feel like they have some sort of control because they don't feel in control of themselves. They don't feel empowered. So they're going to try to seek power over other people. And sometimes this is very subtle. But if you get a bad vibe, if you just always feel kind of drained after hanging out with a certain person, that's something to definitely reconsider. It's part of being on a journey and leveling up. Things are going to change around you. At first, things start to change from within, and then you start to notice like, oh my God, this friendship is really not healthy for me. I always feel drained around this person. They're constantly making fun of me or critiquing me. They're never taking my opinion into consideration. Like, this is not a good situation for me. This is not a healthy relationship for me. And it's kind of a snowball effect. Like, the better you start to feel and the more you truly feel what it feels like to just feel good and feel aligned and feel like I can handle this, I trust myself, you start to notice way more what is out of balance, or maybe who is out of balance in the rest of your life. I think so many people prioritize the wrong things. I love to read memoirs. That's one of my favorite genres because I love history. I love reading, especially women's memoirs and like celebrities and just kind of seeing what they went through, and I just love a good story. I love learning about people's family and like how it affected them in life and whatever. So it's so interesting when people come from a really hard family life, or just they had a really tough upbringing, and maybe they had a dream, like they want to be a singer or they want to like be an actress or whatever, and they come to these huge levels of fame or success or make a lot of money, whatever their goal was. But then because they never heal themselves first, or like while being on their journey of achieving their dreams, so many bad things can happen. Like, that's why you see so many famous people succumb to their addictions, or they have a really tragic ending, because none of that matters if you don't have that solid foundation. Self-love, self-trust. And it's not like self-love in the sense of like, I like how I look today, like my outfit. It's like this deep, just kind of alignment and acceptance of yourself that I think we all are striving for. That's why we do so many things that we do. I think that's why a lot of people struggle in romantic relationships, because it's like you want to fill this void. Like, everyone at the end of the day was a little kid, and we all just want that unconditional love and just to feel good. And whether or not you're like traumatized from your past or not, I think, everyone's different, obviously. The point is, when you can truly be in alignment with yourself to love yourself and to do the hard work of, being willing to take accountability for maybe unhealthy coping mechanisms or unhealthy relationships, when you can just truly work through that and learn to let certain things go and be open-minded and be mindful, so much else will fall into place. And unfortunately, I think because of our society and capitalism and just so many things, a lot of times people who do reach these amounts of success, usually it's like making a lot of money, for some it's fame, whatever, it's like usually you can't do both. Like, I really don't think you can be like a super billionaire and like be living this balanced life where you're like self-love, self-acceptance, like doing good in the world, or someone who's really, really famous. It's like, it's rare. I think that they're like emotionally healthy and okay, because that's just it's such an insane, weird phenomenon. So that also is kind of freeing in a sense, because I think, especially as a woman, as I've talked about on this podcast before, a lot of what we're given as like what our idea of success should be is like get married, have kids. So when you can kind of recognize the scam, as I say on this podcast, you can detach from it and realize like, okay, I'm prioritizing myself and like what truly makes me feel good, energized, alive. What do I feel like I can do that, brings good into this world? And the outcome is less important than like how it feels, you know, because that's another thing. Look at how many people like do the traditional, what you're supposed to do, start a family, settle down. And some people are very fulfilled by that and happy, and that's great. But I think a lot of people aren't, like women aren't, and just basically redefining success so that it is in alignment with you feeling and being your best self. When you are your best self and emotionally regulated and healthy, there is nothing that can recreate that. You know, that is like, I think, truly what everyone strives for. So that needs to be everyone's main priority. And I truly think it starts with just the daily mindfulness and making decisions consciously that are in your own best interest. And again, not in a selfish way, but just like, okay, am I doing this because I actually want to, or because I'm uncomfortable and I actually want to say no? Sometimes you kind of have to challenge yourself, right? It's like, okay, well, do I actually want to do that? Like, you got to kind of check in with yourself. And so doing that from a place of curiosity and again, mindfulness, rather than berating yourself or like putting yourself down or saying, well, I should feel like this, I should want to do this. Like, you know, it's just self-acceptance is everything. I feel like now is more important a time to prioritize that and focus on that than ever. You do not want to be in a bad situation. You do not want to be in a bad relationship. When we feel our best, we can do our best. We can help others. We can think rationally. We don't get in unnecessary fights or like cause stress or like have stress ourselves. It's not like the goal is to never feel stressed. But you know, it's like different energetically when you're like in that mode of constant fight or flight, like on edge, like kind of want to get at anyone, and then calm and regulated. Like I'll stand up for myself, but I don't go around like looking for a fight. So much of glowing up, leveling up, and achieving your goals just truly comes down to alignment, self-love, self-acceptance, and it really does start from within. So much stuff. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this subject. I know we kind of touched on a lot today, but let me know what resonated with you the most, and let me know your number one daily easy tip and trick to cultivate self-love. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will talk to you guys next week. Bye, everyone.